We're so glad you're here for understanding what your five essential data tells you. This is a session designed with and by and for CPS school leaders. My name is Rosa Ramirez Richter. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Engagement at the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research. My role is to build bridges between research and practice, and I hope today's session will be valuable and meaningful, and it will be a springboard to help you answer your questions for the school year. So whether you're brand new to the five essentials or have been working with data for years, our goal today is simple: to sharpen your understanding of the survey, help you make sense of your school report, and just offer practical ways for you to use the data in your school improvement plan, the CIWP, and with your school community, including your local school council. So before we dive in, we're going to launch a poll to understand who's joining us here today. So let's just take a moment and fill out the poll, and I'll continue on and help us understand what we'll cover in the next hour. So what we'll cover in the next hour is we'll have an overview of the five essentials, both like its research foundation and its intent. And then we'll pass it along to our colleagues, and then we'll walk through a five essentials school report of how do you read it, where do you go, and then we will spotlight a principal and their experience in using the five essentials data for school improvement. And finally, but not least, we will hear from Chicago Public Schools on specific guidance and tools and resources that they want to elevate for their school leaders. At the end of the webinar, we will take about 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions. So please feel free to drop in questions as you're hearing the presentation in the Q&A box in your screen. So here's the wonderful folks that we'll be hearing from. This includes Holly Hart, the Survey Director at the U Chicago Consortium. We'll be hearing from Principal Feiwell at Gardenas Elementary, and Colette Walton, who's the Executive Director at U Chicago Impact, and Diana Reed with Chicago Public Schools. All right, so let's see who's with us so we can share the poll. Great. I think we have a good smattering of folks. And just a quick note that we will be recording today's session. We'll make it available on our website, and we'll be sending slides and the recording soon after today's session. So a few considerations. Again, please post questions in the Q&A box. It's being monitored by several staff members. We'll be sure to answer in the chat or bring it to our discussion time towards the end. We will stay mindful of time, and we'll conclude today's session shortly before 5. And then last but not least, please help us and get better at hosting these sessions. We have an exit ticket for you, and we want to know, was this valuable? What other topics you might want to hear from the U Chicago team on? And finally, but not and importantly, we are offering office hours on December 3rd. So if you're interested in that, you will need to fill out the form in the exit ticket. All right, so with that, I'm going to transition it to our survey director, Holly Hart. And while we're spotlighting her, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So Holly Hart is the survey director at the U Chicago Consortium. In this position, she oversees content development and research on the Five Essentials Survey and school climate. She's a mixed methods researcher with a background in psychology and adult development. And she has also studied Chicago's REACH teacher evaluation system, and her research on principals ranges from principal preparation in Chicago and Illinois. So a great asset to the team. Thank you, Holly, for being here with us.
Thanks, Rosa. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. This is going to be an overview of the Five Essentials, an introduction. We'll be talking about how the Five Essentials work in general and providing some tips about the reporting site and using the data with your school. I expect some of this may be new to you, even if you're familiar with the 5 Essentials. However, what we touch on today does not answer your questions. As Rosa said, there'll be a Q&A at the end and also the exit ticket where you can let us know your questions for the future, and you can sign up for the office hours December 3rd. Okay, next slide. To begin with, let's talk a little bit about what the 5 Essentials is. The survey includes questionnaires for both students and teachers. The survey asks about their experiences in school to help identify strengths and areas of improvement. UChicago Impact has been administering the survey since 2011 and has expanded even beyond Chicago. In fact, to date, the 5 Essentials has been administered to more than 5 million teachers and students in more than 6,000 schools across the country and has also inspired work internationally. In some districts and states, including Chicago and Illinois, the results of the 5 Essentials survey are publicly available in the form of online school reports. In CPS, this survey occurs in the spring semester, typically February and March. CPS also administers a parent survey. This is not associated with the UChicago or the 5 Essentials. It is the district's own survey. When taking the survey, students and teachers and other school staff answer multiple choice questions called items. Items about a single topic or a concept are grouped into measures, and those measures are grouped into the 5 Essentials. Grouping information at these different levels allows for a broader summary understanding with the ability to dig deeper into any specific area. In validating the survey, we have found that both strong measure scores and strong growth in measure scores predicted student success in many measures, including GPA, attendance, test scores, and college enrollment. I'll be saying a little bit more about that in a moment. So you can see here the 5 Essentials in what we call the puzzle pieces. They are effective leaders, collaborative teachers, supportive environment, involved families, and ambitious instruction. This slide illustrates the measures underlying each essential and whether they are from the teacher or student survey. If you want to click through those measures, Rosa. Those are indicated by a T or an S. There are 20 measures in the essentials for elementary and high school. However, the precise measures vary slightly between elementary and high school, so there's a total of 22 measures. You can see where the measures differ between elementary and high school in the supportive environment essential. Okay, next slide, please. Here's an example of how these 3 levels of information work for ambitious instruction. This essential is made up of 4 measures: English instruction, and you can click through those, English instruction, math instruction, academic press, and quality of student discussion. Thank you. The last measure is a teacher measure. On the right are a number of items in this measure. For these questions, students answer on a 4-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. For example, my teacher expects everyone to work hard. You're going to see how to dig into information at these different levels when Colette demonstrates the report. Okay, next, please. Now a little bit about where the 5 Essentials survey comes from. The initial study used data from 1990 to 1996 in Chicago elementary schools. The goal of this study was to understand differential progress among schools at a time of historic school reform in Chicago. Researchers found that having strength in 5 key areas of school organization explained why some schools improved student achievement and others did not. They called these schools organized for improvement. The purpose of the survey resulting from this research was to provide schools with an evidence-based tool that could inform what was important for school improvement and how they were doing in those areas. It was not designed as an accountability tool, but a formative instrument for continuous improvement. Next slide, please. More recently, the 5 Essentials survey was revalidated using district-wide data from 2011 to 2019 in both elementary and high school. Outcomes were expanded from test scores and attendance to include GPA, freshman on track, and college enrollment. The revalidation was important for its expansion into high schools and multiple outcomes, but also to confirm the survey's continued validity in the context of accountability. We looked at individual measures and found that each predicted multiple of these outcomes. However, their impact is additive in that while each may contribute individually, they work together and are interrelated, like the ingredients of a cake. That is, in fact, the essence of the conceptual framework of the 5 Essentials. An important finding for schools to understand that I briefly mentioned earlier is that being stronger in a measure, but also growth in that area from year to year, both predicted student success. So to say that another way, if a school isn't currently strong in a particular area, improving in that area from wherever you are is related to improvement in student performance. The revalidation study also examined another important question. Does the relationship between the 5 Essentials and school improvement hold for schools serving students across a range of socioeconomic backgrounds? We confirmed that the 5 Essentials was relevant and valid across these contexts. Okay. I think, yep, 2 clicks. Also part of the validation was a qualitative study conducted while the 5 Essentials was part of the school quality rating policy. In speaking to school leaders and teachers, this study found that the inclusion in the accountability policy, combined with a lack of support or guidance on how to enact change once reports were received, limited the use of the data in school improvement. 2 things that did support the use of data were the assistance of coaches and instructional leadership teams. The work that's currently underway in the consortium and Impact is focused on addressing this feedback, this gap between understanding survey results and school improvement. This webinar is an example of early stages of this work. We've also heard from users that they would appreciate guidance on using data from the 5 Essentials with Cultivate. Next slide, please. As we've just seen, the 5 Essentials captures students and teachers' reports about the overall school culture and organization to help schools identify strengths and areas of improvement. The Cultivate survey captures students' feedback on classroom learning conditions designed to support educators in making practice shifts that can impact academic outcomes, identity, development, and well-being for students. The validation of these 2 surveys has already indicated ways they can speak to each other and provide unique information. Our work going forward in partnership with the district will build the practice and research knowledge using these 2 surveys in tandem. Next slide, please. So I'll just close my section here with some takeaways. Every school has the capacity for improvement. The 5 Essentials helps identify strengths to build on and areas to improve. The data is best seen as a mirror, reflecting other people's experiences. Data is not itself an answer. It is an indicator of where to begin, a conversation starter. Principals should not expect to see reports and have the answers. That is an unrealistic burden to put on yourself. Lean on your community, staff, and students and find solutions with them, working with them. The goal of the 5 Essentials is not higher scores on reports. The goal is a stronger culture and organization that students and teachers experience at school. We have found that what students and teachers tell us predicts school improvement. So listening and adjusting based on those experiences is key. And lastly, I just want to reiterate that our work continues on both the 5 Essentials and Cultivate and moving these forward together. We're focused and committed to better understanding both practice needs and developing these tools. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Rosa.
Thank you, Holly, for that comprehensive overview. So now I'd like to introduce Colette Walton, who is the Executive Director of U Chicago Impact. And in this role, she guides the strategic direction of both the organization and and also just the day-to-day planning and execution of the survey operations for 5Essentials, Cultivate, and the Essential 0 to 5 survey as well. Colette, thanks so much. Take it away.
Thank you, Rosa. So good afternoon and pleased to be with you all this afternoon. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the 5 Essentials. This afternoon, we will explore a sample 5 Essentials school report. This report exploration is meant to be introductory and will mirror the 2026 reports principals and the district will receive later this school year. Before I get started, I want to get a better sense of your role relative to your experience with the 5 Essentials reports. Jessica, please cue the poll. Please take the next 30 seconds to respond to the poll on your screen. If all poll results are in, we can display the results on the screen. This is awesome. So we see we have some new principals, some veteran principals, some folks somewhere in between, as well as members of school leadership teams, district staff, and other folks in attendance. So thank you so much for participating. This is extremely helpful. Next slide, please. As we explore a school report, please take note of key features, including response rates, the dashboard summary, and trends. I will conclude my portion of the presentation by highlighting resources and guidance for using the 5 Essentials reports broadly and the 2025 CPS 5 Essentials reports specifically. Next slide. Report navigation on the 5 Essentials reports is user-focused and intuitive. You can access your school's report either by clicking Log in for private surveys or select a public survey. Next slide, please. Before we dive into a report, I want to highlight the scoring for the 5 Essentials overall. The 1 to 99 scale is what you will see both on the Essentials and Measures pages. However, on the report homepage, you'll see what we refer to as the 5 Essentials overall score or strength statement. On the screen before you, it says for 2025, Sample School 1 is moderately organized for improvement. This is determined by the makeup of your school's essential scores. The positive categories, very strong and strong, are each worth 1 point, while the neutral category is assigned a value of 0. The negative categories, weak and very weak, are assigned a value of -1. Next slide, please. You will then add the assigned values of each essential to calculate the 5 Essentials overall score for your school. So in the illustration we just showed you, the sum of the essentials corresponds to a sum of 0. Actually, Rosa, go back 1 slide, please, just to further illustrate this. So you'll see that the sum here corresponds to 0 because the -1 for supportive environment and +1 for ambitious instruction cancel each other out for an overall sum of 0, which corresponds to, next slide, moderately organized for improvement. Please keep this in mind as we explore a sample school. I will now share my screen. For today's exploration, we will look at a sample elementary school. What you see before you is the landing page of each 5 Essentials school report, known as the report home. On this page, you'll see the 5 Essentials graphic and legend. You'll see the overall score, which we just spoke about, response rates, as well as links to the dashboard summary, PDF downloads, and invite others. So let's dive into each of those quickly. The dashboard summary provides a snapshot of your school's performance each year and offers insights on performance compared to the previous year, if available. You'll see which measures performed the highest and lowest, as well as what measures were most improved or decreased. There's also a graphic that illustrates the change on the 5 essentials over time. We will now use the breadcrumb trail to navigate back to the report homepage. In addition to the PDF downloads, which include a full report summary of the 5 essentials performance and performance on all measures, you can invite others to view your report. The CPS 5 Essentials reports are made available in the spring of each year to school and district staff on a password-protected basis. However, reports are published publicly in the summer of each year. Between these two periods, you can use the Invite Others feature to share your report with members of your instructional leadership team or other stakeholders to support school improvement planning. The report homepage offers multiple paths to dive into your data. You can choose to view how your school is performing on each of the 5 essentials or on all measures. The puzzle piece graphic is also clickable. Just below the 2 blue boxes, you'll see a response rates table, which shows the final response rates for student and teacher surveys, in addition to a comparison to the overall district's response rate. Please note, the parent survey displayed here is not representative of the parent survey administered in the district. Those results are found on the CPS website under My Voice, My School. You also want to note that higher response rates here are more likely to be representative of your staff or student body in comparison to lower response rates. And as a reminder, a 50% response rate is required in order to qualify for a report. So to move along in the exploration, we will use this first blue box to see more detail on how we are performing, or this school, in each of the 5 essentials. Here we see each essential score, which is an average of all the measures that comprise it. We also see the option for viewing the 2-year change. By clicking on 2-year change, the essential table expands. There we go. The essential table expands, and we now see the essentials performance compared to the previous year. When we click on an essential, let's do effective leaders, we'll also see the score for 2024 and 2025 for a change of -5. So the score dropped from 61 to 56 over the course of that year. Okay, so let's explore this essential by drilling down further into the details. We arrive at the summary of performance for the essential, which provides a definition of the essential itself and provides all of the measures that comprise it. Similar to the previous page, we notice a very similar format, listing of each measure, performance, and category, but also the respondent type. The effective leaders essential is made up of staff voice only. We also notice that the essential score is in the neutral range, 56. But that does not mean that there isn't underlying strengths underneath the essential, such as in teacher influence with a score of 60 and teacher principal trust with a score of 63. The button labeled Demo represents the district average for your school, which varies by school type, including elementary, primary, middle, and high school. As you can see in this example, this sample school is outperforming the district in effective leaders with a 56 compared to the district's average of 49. I'm going to toggle off that demo comparison and go back to the 1-year performance. And let's investigate one of the measures. Let's look at program coherence to better understand what staff reported. By clicking on the measure name, we now see 2 additional features, notes and details. When we click on details, we see a list of the items that make up this measure, with the option to explore aggregate responses, item by item, or expand all to view all distributions of response. You also have the option of clicking Show Full History to see how you compared from the previous year on each individual item for each associated measure. The note-taking feature allows you to jot down some low inference observations about the score, save them for later, and reference, or share with members of your leadership team. These notes then become a catalyst for measure analysis and action planning. We can go over this feature in more detail in a future session. But again, this was meant to be an introductory level to viewing a sample 5Essentials school report. So now I will stop sharing my screen and navigate back to the presentation. We want to share some resources to support your work with your ILT and LSC. First, you can use the questions displayed on the screen to support further data exploration. For example, asking which measures improved the most over the past year. We certainly encourage you to do this utilizing your 2025 report. Next slide. You can also scan the QR code on your screen to access the 5Essentials Quick Guide, which we could also pop that bit.ly link into the chat. Next slide. Here's a page from the guide that focuses on understanding what's happening in your school versus what's happening in the district and/or state. In short, curiosity versus context. Next slide. We have also developed a guidance document to specifically address the differences between your 2024 and 2025 reports. As you can see in this illustration, some essential scores are not reported due to unavailable data. The guidance document also covers re-benchmarking, so we certainly encourage you to review this document in full. And we see in the chat that you were unable to take a picture of the QR code. We'll certainly share that slide once more. If we can just go back. Want to make sure you have access. Thank you. Next slide, please. Finally, to access any 5Essentials report in CPS or the state of Illinois, please visit www.5-essentials.org. And that completes this portion of today's webinar. I will turn it back over to Rosa.
Thank you so much, Colette. All right, folks. So now at this point, we've heard the research underlying the 5Essentials. We heard how to walk through a report, got some quick tips. I'm going to pass it off to Principal Jeremy Feiwell to now share his lived experience out in the field using 5Essentials data with his school community. Principal Jeremy Feiwell, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. that was a really good overview of the 5 essentials. I think all principals need to hear that multiple times. I'm the principal at Cardenas School. We're located in Little Village. We are a pre-K to 8th grade school. There's the demographics. Um, we have 3 buildings, and this is my 20th year as principal. So I've been working with the 5 essential surveys for as long as it's been out. And I'm a big fan, and I'm going to explain a little bit how I use it in the next couple slides. So when I do my state of the school report, which I just did this week with my LSC, and in the past, I always show the last year and the current year. So this was from the state of the school last year. And what I do is I show the parents what we were, and I explain it exactly very similar to the way the overview is done, which sections are done by teachers and which sections are completed by students. And we talk about the colors, and they'll ask what is yellow, what is green, and I go over that with them. And so, for example, in 23, we were a lot of yellow and with a little bit of green. And then in 24, we were more green with a lot of yellow. And I talk about what that means as far as like the focus area of students filling out ambitious instruction. So that's a big deal to me. I want the parents to know what each category represents. So I say, like, for example, effective leaders is essentially the teachers rating me and the leadership of the school. Collaborative teachers talking about themselves, sharing practices, being involved with each other. Involved families is the perception of the teachers with the families. And supportive environment, that's the students, their safety, how they feel about, things going on in the school. So the parents are versed in what this means. They don't just say, oh, here's the data and we're well organized. So that's a very important piece to talk about with the parents. There's nothing, you have to be fully transparent. There's nothing to hide here. These are people sharing their thoughts and opinions about the school. One of the things I will say is that I will also tell them that our goal is for 100% of our staff to fill that out. And I'll get to that in a little bit about tips about how you do that. We never have 100% fill it out, but we get close. Next slide, please. So when I do this with the staff, the parents as well in the state of the school, I show the history. So this was from last year, and I'll say, okay, well, our ambitious instruction went up 9 points, effective leaders up 1, involved families up 4, supportive +8, collaborative teachers -2. And I'll explain a little bit about what that means. And when you dig down into the survey, the way that it was shown earlier, you can look at every question and you can pinpoint what are the teachers saying that is a concern in the school. And this is very important because if for example, at our school, collaborative teachers, what that was telling me is that they don't feel like they're having enough time together. Yes, they have a common planning time, but what that really meant was that they want to see each other more in action. So, for example, this year, we started doing more peer observations, visits, and so forth based on the 5 essentials data. And next slide. So at the beginning of the year during week 0, I always do a little data presentation with our staff. And this is a great example of how you use that slide that was shown at the beginning that had the dashboard summary. So I pull this directly from the dashboard summary and I say, okay, what's improved the most and what's decreased the most? And so it's easily, you can see, okay, what's the positive, what's the negative, but you really have to analyze a little bit more than that. And with what we did is I looked at the last one under the positive, which was school commitment, which is essentially the teacher saying they feel committed to Cardenas School. But then I look on the right side under the red and I see a -5 for collective responsibility. And what they're telling me is that they say, oh, they feel committed, but they're not sure that they sense that everybody else feels committed. So there's this mindset that we started working on based on this data 2 years ago. We said, okay, how do we address collective responsibility? And it led to our professional development plan for the whole year, talking about mindset and collective responsibility and what does it mean to be responsible as a whole. And so this data, I take it very seriously when I look at this because that's the teachers telling me how they feel about the school, how they feel about what I'm doing, what the administration's doing, and what everybody else is doing. Next slide. So then you could see the following year, this is the plus and the minus. School commitment went down, but yet the area around collective responsibility went up. Now, you have to keep in mind that every year there's different people filling out the survey, different percentages. You don't want to overanalyze it to start like thinking, oh my God, this is like the end of the world with this. But what I saw on the right side with the red was, okay, they're talking about professional development. Sometimes we don't have a lot of PD time in CPS. And so you have to figure out, how am I going to address that? And looking at more grade level meeting stuff, teacher teams after school, how do we get that going? And what I found interesting is teacher trust, is that means that they're not really sure what's going on in everybody's classrooms, which led us to doing more of the peer observations. I don't know if there is the next slide for me. Let's see. Okay, so tips. When you're sharing this data with your CIWP or LLC, your staff, or that, the goal is to be transparent. Share it. Don't hide it. There's nothing to fear with, when it comes to like the 5Essentials data. The piece I want to say about that is it's really important to have everybody possible take it. But how do you do that is the question, right? So I tell them, make sure you take it on a full stomach and when you have plenty of time for the survey, because the survey is long. What I don't do is ask anybody who's took it. We're not supposed to do that. I monitor the response rates that are given to us by the consortium, and every 3 weeks, I'll just send that reminder email that's on the 5Essentials website that you could do. I don't need to know who finished it, but I do say, look, it's really important because we do use this data. So they do fill it out because they know if I'm talking about the data during week 0, that I do look at it and take it very seriously. The LSC, I have to train them a little bit more on how to read it. And the leadership team, or the CIWP team, which is essentially ILT, we look at that and they understand it because most of them took the survey. And so then they help guide what that PD will look like based on the plan that I have in place, as far as, like, for example, peer visits. What is that going to look like? Grade level visits, departmental visits. It's really important that you're not afraid of the data, because you can't really take it personally, because it's people being honest. Yeah, you might have a couple disgruntled people here or there, but you know who those people are already. But for the majority of your staff, they actually are trying to just give you feedback to use to better the school. And I think that's all I have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Principal
Thank you,
Feiwell.
everybody. Thank you for having me.
And we'll have time for Q&A with all of the panelists for today. And one thing I do want to highlight is, Principal Feiwell, thank you so much for sharing how you are vulnerable with data with your school community, and also your infectious passion for sharing with school leaders and talking about how data can inform your school improvement practices. I think we understand now why you're a frequent presenter at many of the professional learning community workshops for principals and assistant principals. So thank you again. Now we're going to transition, and I'm going to pass on the mic to Diana Reed with Chicago Public Schools. So Diana manages data reporting in CPS and their Office of Network Support. Her role focuses on making connections between district level strategic goal setting and the everyday daily school practice. Diana previously received a master's in education from Harvard University and a bachelor's in computer science and English and American literature from Brown University. So, and also Dinah has collaborated with us researchers at the U Chicago Consortium on School Research on many studies, including adolescent sense of belonging. So thank you, Diana, for being here with us. You can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, excited to be here. And that was such a fabulous lead in with the transparency, the vulnerability, and just the depth of the process and commitment. Yeah, you can head to the next slide. So this is my slide. There's a lot going on in here, and I'm really just here to kind of contextualize. So in terms of 5Essentials data and its role and relationship with your CIWPs, it's a great resource because it elevates student voice. It can be useful both as you're reflecting on foundations in this kind of transitional year 0, and when you're thinking about your future planning. So as you do this, and I went through and kind of looked at everybody's throughout the district, you probably want to consider aiming for trends when you're goal setting rather than I want to hit this exact number. That way, like, let's say you're at 55, if you put the goal 60, you'd kind of be at a yes, no if you made it. But if you got to 59, you could say that was an increase. So just kind of looking at trends and being a little flexible there. There's all kinds of amazing resources to progress monitor. You might run focus groups, like just go talk to kids, talk to teachers. Some of our schools run consultancies, which have been really interesting, successful. That's a place where, like, let's say there's a group responding in a certain way, and you want to focus on their input. You might want to actually just go talk to them and kind of understand the story behind the survey. And then there's a lot of great resources like Elevate or Catalyze that some of our school leaders are using to really give you some more quick feedback. Like 5E is amazing, but it happens once a year. So sometimes folks, want some more data points there. And then finally, just, you're not alone. I looked in over 100 schools have set performance goals in the last round. So there's a lot of interest, a huge range of types of goals. So a lot to explore there. And then, yeah, you can always feel free to reach out to your network if you want to kind of thought partner on any of this. And for data, feel free to contact our team in ONS, your network data strategist. And the next slide is just giving you some context around the community toolkit. So this is yet another sort of suite of resources you can use for really exploring the depth, the story behind the story of the 5Essentials data. So yeah, just another great place to go. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Diana. All right, so we're going to transition to Q&A section and a discussion. We have a few questions to help us get started, but for folks, if you have either technical or some burning, questions you want to drop in, feel free to do that now. We'll be monitoring the chat. But to get us started, we're gonna spotlight all of the panelists on the screen. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second. All right. Hey, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. All right. So one of the questions that we have is, I think you touched on this a little bit, Diana. It's like, how do you keep track of progress throughout the year? Not just when the 5E reports come out, but like, what are some routines or tools that help you stay connected to how students and staff are experiencing the school year? So Principal Feiwell, we'll go to you first, and then we'll have everybody answer.
So as far as like keeping progress, yeah, the 5 essential, if you're using the data right, it's aligned to your CIWP, which we're monitoring quarterly anyway, and having, sessions with teachers and talking. But if, for example, if I'm setting a PD plan around collective responsibility, everything I do with grade level meetings and my PD has a piece that's tied to collective responsibility. And so what you're doing is making sure that you as the leader are, you're not just talking about it during week 0 and letting it go. It's got to be a common theme throughout the year.
Great. Thanks, Principal Feiwell. Holly, Collette, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add to piggyback off of Principal Feiwell. It's really important to utilize the 5 essentials to establish that common language. And that's exactly what he was referencing. And so that way it does carry over. Is really important too when you're using the 5 essentials data for action planning that you incorporate progress monitoring, right? So it's not just the annual administration of the 5 essentials, but if you are creating a targeted plan around improving program coherence, for example, as illustrated earlier, it's about assessing that with consistency, whether that's monthly or quarterly. But it's really important to utilize first the 5 essentials framework as a common language to do so, and then ensuring that you are creating progress monitoring plans and as a part of your overall improvement planning process to ensure growth, and you can see that progress over time.
Holly, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think those two answers were really great. I would reiterate that, you don't have to ask the 5 essentials questions repeatedly all through the year to know, how you're doing on those things, right? It's the topic, it's the focus, you can use those to talk about it, but you can just talk to your folks. You can do your own exit tickets if you want. However, you usually try to collect feedback from folks. It just focus. Don't try to progress monitor every single piece. Make a plan and try to focus on what you're working on.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Right.
You know
Oh,
what, Rosa, if I could just add one other thing too. So it was referenced, it's referenced on or in one of the links that was popped in the chat. Maybe we can do so again. It is the CPS survey information page that we host on the Impact website, but there's a link to open-ended questions that will certainly be a support in doing exactly what Holly was describing. So it allows you to further unpack the 5 Essentials data. So again, not asking those exact same questions, but allowing you to dive a bit deeper. So if we can pop that link back into the chat, the open-ended questions are linked on that page.
beautiful. Thanks, Colette. Diana, I know you spoke to this a little bit in your section. Anything you want to add about what you've heard in your work across the district of how folks are tracking progress?
Sure. Yeah, I think all the resources mentioned are great. And I think sometimes it's nice to use an already researched set of questions. You don't have to worry about writing your own or phrasing is going to throw anybody. And you can just pick a couple. And the other thing I would just say, sometimes people get concerned about survey fatigue, right? And that's real. But I think the real way to combat that is to show people how you're actually listening to the survey results and changing your practice. And I think you may have to reiterate, like, here we are. This is why I did this, made this change. It's because I heard this message in the surveys. And I think if people feel as if they're listened to, then they want to give feedback. But if they feel as if they're just dumping comments in a box that somebody's throwing in the trash, they're not going to be so interested.
Thank you for raising that. Yes, those feedback loops are so important. All right, we have one question in the chat, and Colette, I think maybe you might want to take this, is why do parents take a different survey and how compatible is it with the 5 Essentials survey?
If you're referencing so I think there are a couple of things, and maybe Diana might offer some context to this too. So our longstanding partnership with CPS has never included a parent survey, and the district has always owned that process. We do have a supplemental parent survey, and it is a requirement through our work with the Illinois State Board of Education. So that is why, when I was demoing the sample report, we saw a space there. We haven't done a ton of work of examining the district survey in comparison to the supplemental parent survey that we offer. But again, it is offered more broadly beyond CPS as, at least in Illinois, to fulfill that requirement for the survey of learning conditions that is mandated annually. We will say that the constructs, the items in the survey, they are situated pretty well alongside the 5 Essentials. For the survey that we offer, I cannot speak to the content of the survey that CPS offers, but that is kind of the state of affairs as it relates to the parent survey.
Thanks, Colette. All right, so we're going to move along. We have another question of where can folks get data for CPS and Illinois school culture and school climate to help put their school's data into context? So what resources or information reports can help put a school's data in context within the district or statewide? So maybe Holly, Colette, Diana, Principal Feiwell, any thoughts on that?
As far as where you get the if I'm looking for the 5 Essentials data, I mean, there's that 5 Essentials website, right? The 5essentials.org, but there's also the Illinois report card, the Illinois State report card, which has all the same data. It just has different colors. Illinois likes to put it in different colors than the 5 Essentials, right? So yeah, the Illinois report card is an awesome place to get data on any school, not just culture data, but academic growth, all that stuff. That's the starting point for anybody.
Great, thanks.
Sorry, I didn't
Holly.
quite hear the question. Yep, I've caught up now. Yes, so you can compare yourself, as Colette showed you, to CPS. on the school report. That is comparing, for example, if I'm an elementary school to elementary schools in CPS. If I'm a high school, it's comparing myself to high schools in CPS. You can tool around. Illinois' version of the 5 Essentials also is public. Colette, can you see the Illinois compared to?
To CPS?
No.
Like if you're an Illinois school,
Mhm.
can you compare to Illinois, the district?
You can compare to the entire state, yes. If you are a school in Illinois, yes.
So that's another way. And also, Advance Illinois has a report called The State We're In. I think the last one was 2022, but that also has statewide 5 Essentials information as well as all kinds of other information to talk about the context of the state.
One
Okay.
other quick note as it relates to the 5 Essentials in Illinois and the state report card, that's usually released around October or so annually. So if you haven't checked that out, you certainly can do so. But just a quick note. So that release does not coincide with the public release or the soft launch, as we typically refer to it as, of the 5 Essentials each year. So we goal ourselves to release the 5 Essentials reports during the school year. They go public early summer, and then the report cards are typically released around late October annually.
Great, thank you. And Diana, any work from like from the district on helping schools understand like district-wide trends or how are things faring in a certain year?
Sure. I mean, I think we should, drop some resources just so folks can have that reference point. I would say, yes, it's nice to have context. And anytime you're averaging such a large and diverse place, it's hard to say what that actually means. Like, I think really the value and the richness is within looking at your own data year over year. But sure, you can definitely use those as context and framing. I totally understand why you would want to know kind of like where you're situated. I would just say the overall focus is kind of more on your progress personally.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so this is our last question. And it's mainly around, and perhaps Principal Feiwell and Diana, you can go first, especially given your working with schools across the district, is, what are some do's and don'ts or like just some tips of how school leaders can share their 5E data with local school councils or just families at large?
I mean, like I said earlier, be transparent, share the data is a do. A don't is trying to publicly pinpoint like who's saying what or like how it's like being perceived, like saying like, I have this third grade teacher that must be the 1% that doesn't agree, like don't do that. Don't, like so you want to like I said earlier, don't take it personally if there's something that you don't agree with, but be reflective. Share the data, share it with your staff, share it with your LSC, and use it as a reflective tool for school improvement. That's the bottom line.
Wonderful. Diana, anything to add?
No, just to underscore that and also to give yourself some time. You may see a result and have a reaction to it, totally human, totally natural. Like give yourself that ability to process. And then as you come back, try to depersonalize. I mean, the classic example is teacher caring, right? A teacher feels as if they care a lot. They're, coming early, they're staying late, and they had a lower score on teacher caring. But then they sit down and talk to the kids, and it turns out it's about pencils or who knows what. Like it's really just to try to sort of hear the feedback, whether or not it's what you did or what you intended. It's what people's lived experiences, not right or wrong. And just, try to process it with your community because everybody owns it. It's everybody's data.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share my screen with just some helpful links. I know we've been blowing up the chat with lots of links in there. So just some helpful links of school reports, where to get that guidance that Colette referred to around the missing data and guidance for CPS schools. How does 5Es and Cultivate relate to one another? We have a two-pager available. And then also the CPS Community Engagement Toolkit, exactly what Diana was just talking about, of like our mindsets and around data and how to be vulnerable with it. So I want to emphasize our exit ticket. So we are offering office hours on December 3rd at 4 p.m. And so if you have an interest in attending those, please fill out the exit ticket and mark your interest there. But also we have a few questions of like, what other questions might you have that we didn't get to today, or other topics that we can dive deep into. And then as well, here's the 5E quick guide again, that shows you just a quick overview of how to process this information. So with that, thank you so much for spending an hour of your time with us. We hope to do more of these. And please stay in touch here, folks. If you are have questions around the research or want to learn more, here's the folks that you can contact. If you have very technical questions around survey administration or Windows, please contact the impact-surveys at uchicago.edu. And again, as Diana said, for CPS specific information, please contact your network team. So again, we look forward to seeing you all at office hours on December 3rd at 4 p.m. Please fill out the exit ticket. Thank you again, and a huge thanks to our panelists for agreeing to share their story and their experiences. Thank you all, and have a good night.